Thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome to our recruiter Q&A on CV writing. Just a couple of housekeeping things as usual. This session is being recorded. We will be sending out the recording to anyone that isn't able to join for the full session or anyone who registered and wasn't able to join today. We would encourage you to use the Q&A box to ask any of your questions. We have had some questions in advance, so we are going to try to answer some of those. If we don't get around to answering your specific question, we are going to go back over all the submitted questions, and there will be a follow-up kind of pack that will come out to all of you with some further resources, some top tips from some of the recruiters, and of course some answer to the questions that we maybe weren't able to go to. So yes, we can hopefully get started. So just a quick introduction. I'm Simi. I am a candidate engagement specialist at EY, and I support our candidate engagement team in a variety of activities, but including hosting webcasts such as this, where we're hoping we can give some real value add to all of you who have joined us today. Today's topic is going to be on CV writing, and we're going to cover CV writing for not just EY, but CV writing in general. Please note that any advice or tips that we give, that our panelists give, is going to be their opinion, my opinion. It's not fact. Don't take anything that we say as gospel. We're just hoping that we'll be able to give you some ideas, some thoughts around creating or rewriting your CV. You know, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback after the session. And although we've got the Q&A, you're welcome to add your own ideas that we could maybe share with the rest of the audience. So yeah, we hope you find it really useful. There will be further sessions, just to let you know, coming up. Will be the next one will be on interview tips and techniques, and there'll be further follow-up ones. So hopefully you'll be able to access those. So if we could go ahead and start introducing the panelists. We'll start with you, Harpreet, if that's okay, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Yep. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm Harpreet Panham. I work within the tech consulting team as part of as a recruitment lead. I've been with EY 2 years. Yeah, that's me.
Tom, if you don't mind giving yourself a quick introduction.
Yeah, I'm Tom. I've been in recruitment for about 7 years, 5.5 in agency, working across the UK at all different levels from entry to senior. And now I work at the executive level recruitment within EY.
Thank you. And Antonia, do you mind introducing
Hi, everyone. Yes, I am Antonia. I'm based in our Newcastle office, and I've been working in recruitment across not just the UK, but other areas of the world as well for about 10 years. And I've been with EY for 2 years.
Thank you. And lastly, but not least, Sam.
Hi everyone, I'm Samantha and I'm from Malaysia. I have been working in recruitment since 2016 in Malaysia, and I've joined EY UK in 2020. Currently, I'm a recruitment advisor for tax and assurance team.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the panelists for offering your time to do this. We've chosen the panelists to hopefully give you as much kind of diversity across EY. So you can see from the recruiters' bios that everyone works in a slightly different service line and recruit at slightly different levels. So we're hoping that we've got, I think, quite a varied audience joining us today, that everyone's going to be able to take something away from the session. And we hope that the advice and the tips and hints and opinions that we give will be useful to you. We'll go to the question first. I think that I see debated the most. I've seen debated the most over much of my career, and especially on LinkedIn these days, but the length of a CV. So how long should a CV be? Tom, do you mind if we go to you first to answer that?
Yeah, I'm happy to weigh in on the great debate that is how long a CV should be. And I'd say my opinion is that there should be around 2 pages. I think you can say a lot within that space. And we're going to talk a lot today about how to get really the last 5 years or so condensed into about 2 pages. There are obvious exceptions, which is fair to say. I think people fresh from education, 1 page or 1.5 pages is fine as you build that experience. And then the other side of the coin is more senior director level candidates. It's absolutely fair if you've been in projects or you've been working in quite technical roles. I think extending it to 3 or 4 pages is absolutely fine as long as the content stays relevant to the job you're applying for. So hopefully that's my opinion. That's my hopeful quite short answer. It's about 2 pages and that's the goal.
Great, thank you. Now, Harpreet, you work in consulting. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. How long do you think a CV should be?
Yeah, I think just to echo Tom's point is it can really vary depending on the qualifications and experience and the industry you work in. So like you've mentioned, within the tech consulting team, we do see more than 2 pages. So as long as you keep your CV up to date, tailor it to each job description, application wise, and really highlight the skills and experience as well. So I think it can be. We do see pages longer than 2 pages, so there's no kind of set rule. I think it just varies, but as long as you're going back and really reviewing the CV and saying, is this relevant to the role I'm applying? And if it needs to be 3, 4 pages, then it does. So no set rules.
That's great. I think that's really interesting, actually, because obviously Tom comes from recruiting for a finance background, where I think you'd mentioned previously that it can be a 2-page CV for something that's sort of a bit more, I don't know, what's the word, like measurable kind of like skills you can probably do within 2 pages. But it just goes to show really, and Harpreet's obviously said that within consulting, the CVs can be a bit longer. So I think it goes to show that I've seen a lot of people advise that it should be 2 pages, but really, I think like Harpreet said, it's whatever, yeah, it's whatever you feel comfortable with, whatever you feel comfortable doing. I don't know if Sam or Antonio, if you have anything to add to that. Do you agree, disagree?
Go on, Sam.
Well, for my advice, I agree with Harpreet and also Tom. I said that always prioritize relevant and critical information over length itself. It's more important that your CV is clear and concise and focused rather than, fit within a set number of pages. Do you agree, Antonia?
Yeah, absolutely. I think don't feel that if you're looking at your CV and you're thinking, gosh, that looks a bit short, it's not quite long enough, it looks like it's not got enough meat on it, I wouldn't worry too much. I think as long as it's concise and clear, don't feel like you have to waffle to fill a gap. The length isn't necessarily important if the information that the recruiter needs is there and that it's kind of communicated everything you need it to.
Great advice, thank you. And so that kind of like leads me on, Tony, if you don't mind answering this question, like how should a CV be formatted? Like what should it kind of like look like and consist of?
So I think a CV obviously is a very personal document, and you want it to be able to express your experience and who you are a little bit, but there are some kind of basic elements that you should try and keep consistent, just for ease of reading and for kind of that clear communication we talked about. So you want it to be kind of clear as possible, the way it's laid out, very clear, very concise, chronological if possible. So going backwards, what's your most recent role, and kind of carrying on from there. I think that we need to think about professional fonts. So I know everyone makes jokes about Comic Sans or whatever else, but as clear as possible, as kind of formal as possible, font-wise, is always better. And I think as well, if you're thinking about more your sort of earlier, more irrelevant roles that aren't necessarily related to the role that you're applying for, you don't necessarily need to include them, especially if you've got a healthy amount of work experience coming after that as well. So definitely consider the format as regards to the layout as more
Great.
important.
Great advice there. And Sam, do you have anything to add to that at all?
So I would say like in terms of like for student itself, if you're applying for a Big Four or for any companies, start with strong objective. As a fresh candidate, you want to highlight your aspirations. And are you a finance grad aiming for audit roles or more interested in consultancy? Be clear, be very clear, and list down your relevant degrees, majors, and any honors or distinction. Highlight any professional skills you've obtained from previous internships or part-time jobs. So yeah, and remember your CV gets you the interview. So your passion and preparation is more important. And also just to note, like in EY, we, for student itself, we have a CV blind policy. So if you're interested with the student vacancy, all you need to do is go to the student recruitment website and complete an application form. It is very important to fill in as many details as you can.
Great, thank you. Just to let everyone know that the follow-up content will include some links. So if we've got any students on the call, we'll send you the link of some information about the application process at EY. And I guess kind of like related to that question, I've had this question a few times, but should a CV have a personal statement? And if so, what should it consist of? Harpreet, would you mind covering that, please?
Yeah, sure, thanks. I think again, it depends, right? If are you comfortable? Only put what you're comfortable on your CV. It should be about you. So if you're not comfortable putting that personal statement, or you don't think it's going to make an impact, then I wouldn't. But if but however, I feel like it is the first thing that everybody does see, so it is really important part of it to able to like capture the interest of the individual reading it. So we're really, I think, a strong opening sentence that immediately captures the reader's interest is key. This is where you can kind of set yourself a little bit apart from others, because it's not just the technical side or what job you've done. So really highlight your unique selling point as well. So personally in mine, I've come from, as mentioned previously, from like a legal experience when I went into recruitment. So my personal statement's actually really key when I was trying to go into a different field of experience, just really explaining, I suppose, the transparent skills I've got. And I still, on my personal statement, do include my legal experience and how I've gone into recruitment as well. So it really just try to customize your personal statement for each kind of like job application, highlight your recent, relevant, transparent skills as well. I think some of the do's is definitely get proofread it, whether it's by yourself or someone else, and definitely don't talk about anything that's not going to be relevant to the application you're applying as well, because it's ideally just a one paragraph for yourself.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think that's really interesting that you've drawn on your own experience, because I've had conversations with a lot of candidates who are looking for career change. They're looking to move into something different, and they're kind of like, well, how do I start? How do I, engage the person who's reading my CV to really understand why I want to make this move? So that's really helpful. And to the other panelists, I don't know, if you've got anything to add to that, Antonia, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think Tom was looking like he might be there. I'll give it to Tom first.
I'll go, Tom. Sorry.
I think just sort of very quickly, I think it's all about just setting context very quickly and very efficiently, and being quite economic with your words. I don't mind if a personal statement is 3 lines or 2 sentences. I don't mind even if it's not there at all. I think if you feel that it needs to set the context of your career to date, include it. But just to absolutely echo what Harpreet said, it's about setting the context about yourself and giving us a bit of a sense of why you're applying. So that's all I wanted to add. It's almost like a bit of a blurb for a movie the recruiter's about to read, which is your CV in a way, if it could be a wee bit cheesy about it, but
that's a really good point, because like CVs represent people. We are people, and our CV is kind of like the one document we have if the role you're applying for requires a CV, where we can kind of show ourselves beyond just what work we've done. Like, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, this is what I'm looking for. So I think that's really good. And especially now, where we, a lot of companies, including EY, really want people to bring their authentic selves to work. We want to know people outside of work, we will know them in work, whatever people are comfortable sharing. So that personal statement is very much, isn't it, about, this is how I would like to present myself. If you choose to put one in your CV, again, it's not always essential, it's what you feel comfortable including. And Tom, following on from that, what do you think the content of the full CV should include? What should it look like?
I think, yeah, this is where we could probably talk a little bit more about the work experience, which is it's the engine of your CV. It's what should get the most time and attention. I think there's a lot of templates out there which generally do quite a good job of giving people a bit of a sense of what a CV should look like and how to structure work experience. For us, what we're always going to be looking for, and for all of my previous hiring managers and stakeholders that I've worked with over the years, we want to see things in reverse chronological order. So you start at the most recent experience. We want to see a list of employers, your job title or job titles within that, and the dates included. I think month and year is really essential, just as you would be putting it on your LinkedIn too. And really the best way to describe the work experience, which let's not forget, this is the most important part of your CV. The best way to get across your experience is bullet point sentences, in my view. You don't want to have just like bullet point one word saying payroll, accounts, admin. I genuinely seen a CV that once just said a bullet point, IT. That could be anything, which wasn't very helpful. So help me help you. And equally, we don't want very long paragraphs, which, you know, as great as your prose might be, the most efficient way that you would probably want to read information is through bullet point sentences. What you put in those bullet points as well also matters. So your primary responsibilities would be, you know, your first 4 or 5 or so bullet points that that you would include under your most recent experience. Anticipating questions, there's no real finite number of bullet points that you would have under each role. It really depends on how varied each job is. You might be doing multiple jobs in one role. You might be doing one very specific thing. So you could have, I would maybe suggest 6 to 12 bullet points, 15 if it's quite varied. 20 if you've done an absolute load of work as well. But within those bullet points, what we want to see is, you know, nice industry, technical, specialist focused language and keywords. The keywords is what all of us recruiters look out for whenever we go in to look at a CV. And what is a keyword? A keyword is what sets you apart professionally from maybe your other friends who might be in engineering, if you work in audit, who might work in sales, who might work in IT. We want to see like I don't want to use the word jargon, but we do want to see the kind of stuff that's specific to your sector. So in recruitment, we'd include GDPR sourcing, CV screening. These are the kinds of words we're very familiar with. In audit, it could be, you know, client visits, advising, whatever it might be. All those different things. That's what we want to sort of see in the work experience. Really, the devil's in the detail when it comes down to how you describe it and how you articulate it. If it's in sales, who are you selling to? What's the platforms you're using? What industries are you selling in? And these are the things that we want to understand, focus on, and just take away from reading your CV. There was a post shared by one of the recruiters from Google that's been widely shared on LinkedIn that if you wanted a structure to follow as a platform just to build your work experience on, each sentence could effectively read something like, I did X as measured by Y by doing Z. I'll say that again because people might be having their lunch and they might want to write that down. But I did X as measured by Y by doing Z. Effectively, you're asking yourself 3 questions. What did I do? How did I do it? And how was it measured? You can build your experience on this and start to get quite a number of bullet points listed out in that way. And again, focusing on your primary, the bulk of your time in the first 4, 5, 6 bullet points too. We've talked about already people going through career changes, so they might be a slight exception to this. You want to focus a little bit more on the transferable skills. Perhaps even before your work experience section, you might want to have a key skills section, which could list things from programs, the Excel formulas you've used. It could, if you're in IT, you could tell us that you've worked with Python or C# or C++. Please don't write to me if you do IT. I've never really recruited in the IT space, so I'm not familiar with all those terminologies. But those are the key skills we want to see and the transferable skills that come with it too. And it might mean if you are looking for a career change, you might have to go a little bit further back than 5 years just to bring out a little bit more of the transferable skills. I want to round up very quickly that I think what sets a good CV apart from a great CV is an achievement or a career highlight section. We don't get too hung up whether it's going to be one specific section or something at the very bottom of each employer that you've worked with. We just want to see achievements. We want to see what makes you different, what sets you apart, what ways can you sort of, quotes, I hate to use the phrase, but blow your own trumpet in a way. If you were in sales, how much did you increase the sales figures by each month, each year. If you were promoted in the first 6 to 12 months of your job, brilliant, tell us about that. If you were working on different projects or transformations, or you were seconded in different areas, tell us about that and what this is the crucial part, what your specific role and contribution was to achieving success. This is what sets it apart, because if you put in numbers, timeframes, percentages, figures, that if you say secured a big deal that you worked on start to finish, that's the information that we want to see. And that's objective, you can verify it, and it makes a huge difference for us recruiters to see and understand that you're not just describing, I work well under pressure, I work well in a team. Tell us about those team sizes. Tell us about who you reported to. Did you support anyone? Did you coach anyone? Those are the achievements that we want to see, just to give you a little bit of a flavor, in my opinion, of what sets it apart. And the last little thing I want to round up, the last little thing I want to say is AI cannot do that for you. Only you know those numbers, only you know those figures, and we want to see you put them down and share them with us. So that's what I want to see in a
Thank you.
CV.
No, that's brilliant. And I mean, you've covered some really good points in your answer. Harpreet, is there anything that you would add to that in terms of content of a CV?
Yeah, so I think on Tom's point is just to kind of cover up it, rather than just looking at the technical side. I think if you include like a little bit of your personal achievements, as you've confirmed, that we're really keen to kind of understand the person as well individually, not just the technical skills. So this could be like examples of like successful projects that you've been involved in, some improvement outcomes. It could include your voluntary work as well. So what do you do kind of outside I suppose your 9 to 5, couple of like educational achievements, like project leadership that you've been involved in. It could be stuff that is still yet to be happening as well, what you've put your name forward for. You still don't know the full outcome of that particular project or that personal achievement, but it's still to kind of highlight. I think this is really sets you apart from, I suppose, just the technical side as well.
Really good advice there. We've had a question come in. I think it's actually quite a good question. And they've asked, Antonio, if you don't mind answering this, but with regards to content of the CV, what should come first, education and experience, or experience than education? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think a lot of it depends on the type of role that you're applying for. So for example, in tax, where I recruit for at the moment, quite often we want to see your qualifications and education because it qualifies you for the role. So that is always useful to come as a first kind of part of the CV, a first section of the CV, followed by your job roles. But again, if it's not absolutely necessary, your education, your degree, whatever you've done, that can come after your work experience. It's really up to you as to whether you judge what you judge as most important and kind of where it sits. Again, as long as it's relevant and it's clear, it'll be read and looked at. So that's the most important thing to remember. It's just really adjusting it per role.
Yeah, great, thank you. And with regards to, and we've had a question come in actually, again, Antonio, if you don't mind if I stick with you, but are there any definite no's or absolute yeses for a CV? Like the person's asked if there are any red flags, for when you look at a CV. Be really interested to hear your thoughts on that.
So I think I can't say there's any red flags, but I think that there are some things that are not necessary. So one thing I would say is, obviously, if you're writing a CV, always triple check for any grammatical errors or spelling mistakes, because even if we as recruiters kind of let it go, you don't necessarily want it going to the hiring manager. So always triple check. Emojis aren't probably relevant on a CV, I would say, not necessary. And I think as well, it depends on where you are. When I worked in the Middle East and I recruited for Asia as well, it was quite standard for CVs to come with a photograph of yourself on, so a bit of a selfie. Here in the UK, that's not necessarily it's not really necessary. We don't really look at that and we don't need it on a CV. So it's not necessary to take up room with a photograph. If you're kind of further on in your career, I've mentioned it before, maybe take out roles that aren't relevant anymore. So if you worked in a chip shop or, you know, a corner shop and it's not relevant for the role that you're applying for now, you can remove that. I've removed already my pub restaurant work experience because it's not relevant for recruitment. And yeah, don't overpack it. We've already said that. Think of your key achievements, your relevant duties, and don't copy your CV. I think it's really, really it happens a lot where we find that people have gone online and searched for CVs and potentially downloaded one and not really adjusted it enough to reflect themselves. So things either don't make sense, they're kind of not quite right, or we get two people applying with the same CV. So please make sure that your CV is you, you know, it's about you, and it's a place to really kind of think of presenting yourself. You don't need to copy that.
It's interesting what you said about like spell checking and I don't know about the panelists, but I've been finding that there's a lot more open conversations about neurodiversity and dyslexia. I feel like it's obviously been around for a long time, but there's a lot more awareness around it. Do any of you have any thoughts around, a CV being written or being delivered by perhaps someone who has dyslexia or maybe neurodivergent? Just keen to hear any thoughts and opinions on that.
So just I can kind of put it, maybe I haven't got example of like on that side, but I can kind of put it how it relates to tech. On tech, like I think, like you said, things are changing. The attitude, I don't really get anybody coming back and saying no to a CV for a spelling or grammar myself. So I haven't come across that myself. So yeah, I think people are definitely, like you said, more aware. And for tech, it's the keywords of we're not looking for someone who's it's the technical skills we look at as well. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And at EY, of course, we make adjustments for specific needs, and I think more and more companies are doing this at the moment. But yeah, I agree, Antonio. I think if you spell check, get someone to proofread if you can. But actually, that brings me on to a question, a discussion I was having with a colleague not long ago, and this question's come up a few times. And again, I've seen this on LinkedIn quite a lot about people who get discounted or they feel they've been discounted from roles because they've got a gap in their CV or their experience, and it could be for a variety of reasons. We're not gonna, we're not gonna we're not going to pass judgment, but Sam, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. And if someone has a gap in their CV or experience, how should they address it, and should they address it in their CV?
Well, I guess first of all, crafting a compelling CV can seem really challenging, and I know especially if you have had a career break. So I think what people need to remember is that a CV is more than just a list of jobs. It's a way to showcase your your professional story as well. So just like any good story, it can have pauses. So just know that it is okay to have a career break. And in EY itself, we respect and value our people, even if they have taken a career break, because a career break does not define your skill sets or your capabilities at work. So, example, I've taken a career break in 2019 and for a year, and I've included that in my CV. I was still called up for an interview, and during interview, I get why people are nervous sometimes, worried that they may get judged or, you know, but honestly, EY didn't judge me at all. They focus on what I've done in my previous company, and also they've celebrated that I've traveled to a lot of places during my career break. So there's no judgment at all. And career breaks can be due to multiple reasons like traveling, parental leave, further studies, health issues, or personal pursuits. So just remember, it's not the break itself, but how you present it that matters. When you come across the work experience section, don't hide the break. I would highly recommend, to address it transparently. You don't have to write in great details to explain why you took the break. Just a simple line in between to say, from 2022 to 2023, I took a career break for personal development or, voluntary work, or to further my studies to do an MBA in XYZ university, for example. And remember to focus on the positives in your CV. Even during breaks, you can, you might have acquired new skills, whether through formal education, online courses, or life experiences. So make sure just to highlight these on your CV. For example, if you've learned new languages during your career break or took a digital marketing course, these are valuable, and make sure to add these onto your CV to highlight them that you've obtained them during your career break. And also in the interviews. Sorry.
No, that's
Yes.
great. I think no, that's I think that what you've said I think is great, because this is a thing, like I personally, I don't know about the panelists if you agree, but very passionate about diversity and inclusion, and that means that we are we're okay, and we're, but people will have gaps for, like you said, for a variety of reasons, and I hope that as many companies, like we do at EY, are happy to still consider someone who has got a gap in their experience or their CV. But I love the tips that you've given, Sam, about like how to address it in your. I remember not long ago someone shared that they'd had a bit of time off work, I don't know, several years or something, raising children, and then they put like time off or something on their CV, and they listed all the things they had achieved, and it was like managing schedules, managing various meals, multitasking, resolving disputes between three under sevens, and
Yeah.
and it was great. And I was like, yeah, you know what? Someone's had time off work to look after children. In fact, they're probably a better candidate than someone who's maybe been, working in the same role for several years. And yeah, gap in a CV, you're right, shouldn't define someone's ability to do a role. So and to the audience, if you've got any thoughts or comments on anything that we're saying, obviously we've invited you to write some questions, but feel free to give your own thoughts, feedback, and experience if you don't mind, and and we can share it with a wider audience. But Sam, that actually brings me on to another question, and it's, I don't think it's actually a difficult question as it would have been maybe several years ago, but if someone has a disability, we've touched slightly on dyslexia, neurodiversity, but if someone has a disability, a mental health condition, or anything like that, or they need a reasonable adjustment, whether it's for the interview, the application process, or even the when they start the role themselves. Um, what do you think about disclosing that in a CV? Not an interview, but in a CV, and someone's actually come in and asked the question, a really good question about cover letters, like should we include a cover letter? So either in the CV or cover letter, should we disclose that? What's your thoughts on that? Be keen to hear it.
Well, ultimately, the decision to disclose it's deeply personal, so it depends on how you feel about sharing this information. That
Okay.
said, there are advantages to disclose if you need any reasonable adjustments. So disclosing can ensure you to get the necessary accommodations during an interview, such an extended time or specific equipment. And for instance, if you require additional time to complete an online testing due to having dyslexia, disclosing this will enable us to make necessary adjustments to tailor to your needs. So yeah, so I encourage people to disclose it, know that it's more pros than cons to it, and it's completely up to you as to whether or not you want to disclose that.
And to the panelists, do you would you what would your advice be? Do you agree? Do you think it's important to disclose it, or do you think it'd be best to, I don't know, like in your experience, do you have any thoughts on that?
My experience, I think I personally, if it was me in the situation, I know that and I needed a reasonable adjustment, I would measure a kind of a firm that I know I'd be able to work with as to how open they were to my disclosure. So if I felt, as I hope people do with EY, that comfortable with disclosing that and asking for those reasonable adjustments, I would know that as if I was to move in to that as a workplace, it would be somewhere that would again make those adjustments for me in my place of work so I could be successful. So it's a good measuring stick really, but again, as Sam said, it's very personal, really up to you as to how comfortable you feel and whether you feel it's relevant to disclose it at an early stage. But a good firm that would be able to support you in the workplace should be supportive of that in the process as well.
That's great. And panelists, have you got anything else to add to that, Tom? Harpreet?
Yeah, I think just to reiterate, I think it's deeply personal. I think one of the great changes that we are seeing in the workplace is a lot more employers are recognizing that being neurodivergent, being differently abled does bring different skill sets to a business and an organization. And we all know we've had some fantastic colleagues that have talked about this publicly, about their their abilities, or sorry, in their career, the challenges that they've had to face from a world that wasn't quite built for them have given them extra superpowers. So they're able to approach the world and the workplace in a very different and positive way. And I think a lot of other companies alongside EY are catching up. But yeah, it's deeply personal to you. I don't think it's my place to tell you what you can and can't do on the CV with regards to that. But I think the measure of a good employer is someone that respects that, understands that, and can accommodate that as best as possible.
So I guess that's that kind of like, we talk a lot nowadays about researching a company that you're applying for, when we know more and more people, more candidates are researching the diversity and inclusion kind of commitments, and kind of culture within organizations. And again, to the audience, if you've got any thoughts or feedback on anything we've talked about on this particular topic, I know we've spent a bit of time talking about it, but I think it is important. And Harpreet, I know that we've touched slightly on like, not copying CVs, and we've talked a little bit about candidates who may have dyslexia, who may be neurodiverse, but there's a lot of support that people can get in enhancing their CV, or doing something additional with their CV. What advice would you give to the audience about where they can potentially get support from? What tools or resources might be available where they can get support in writing or rewriting a CV?
Yeah, so just to kind of confirm for that, I would say like your peer review, ask like family members to give like a on the relevancy and overall presentation of this kind of CV as well. So that will definitely, having like another opinion at times will be beneficial. It could be, you can look at a couple of like online CV builders and template, but again, just to reconfirm, please do make it your own. This is your CV. I would definitely say, but good to have like a template of what a CV can look like, but definitely make it your own. It could be like recruiters as well, right? When you're having conversations with recruiter about a particular whether it's with an agency or in-house, where to really ask for guidance as well sometimes on the CV presentation as well. Yeah, like I said, there's all those, like this stuff on other platforms as well. You can go to webinars where people can kind of give advice on that as well. So yeah, but definitely make it your own, and it's only there to, like any tool, there's to enhance, not replace your own personal touch to your CV.
That's great, thank you. And Tom, you touched, as I mentioned, you touched slightly, I think, when we were talking about the content of a CV, and the hot topic is AI. So we know that AI is getting used more and more for big things, little things, everyday things. What's your thoughts on utilizing AI to create a CV?
Yeah, it's exactly as Harpreet said. It's there to enhance your CV. It's not going to be able to write the CV for you. I think everything that you do is personal to you. It's the professional experience that you've gained, getting all the numbers, all the achievements, and you did all the hard work. AI can just be a very useful tool to just help the presentation, help the. I mean, a lot of the ones like ChatGPT are language models, so they're best placed to help advise you on maybe what way the sentence could be structured, how could it read a little bit better. I know I would perhaps suggest using it, and I'd use it from time to time just to make sure like my grammar, my spelling, and everything else is as correct as it can be in that. So it's there to help you. I think you can use it within reason, but the fundamental point is no one can replace the knowledge and experience that you have. But feel free to use ChatGPT just to do that fine tuning, I suppose.
Fantastic, thank you. I think that's some good advice. Yeah, I think be cautious. Use it for, use your discretion to, when using AI, and that I think goes for applying for roles as well. Anything that that's related to to securing a role. So I don't know. Other panelists, have you got any thoughts to add on that? I'm just conscious of time. We've got 20 minutes left. I think we've had lots of questions come in, so I'm hoping we're going to be able to get as many of those answered. But has anyone got anything to add around AI, or any other support, any other resources or tools you can think of that we can share with the audience? Like I said, audience, we will share a pack after with some further information. But off the top of your heads, anything you think you can think of?
AI is really exciting, and it, much as Tom said, it can be used in a really helpful way. It's definitely there to help you if you use it in the right way. But would reiterate what you said. You don't want it, your CV to sound different to who you are in person. If you're using it to help with formatting, which you can do, and or summarizing, or spelling, anything like that, it's really useful. But yeah, there's limits to its usefulness.
Thank you. Okay. So I feel like we've covered quite a lot in terms of, we've gone over like content, what to do, the formatting. So let's say someone's done all of these things, they've got a really good CV, and we've had a few questions come in that kind of like follow up from this, but you've got a really good CV and you're happy with it. What do you do now? Like, what's the next steps you can take, that you've got a CV that you're happy with? Antonia, do you want to sort of take a lead on this first, and I'll come to the rest of the panelists?
So I think it depends what you're applying for. If you're applying for a number of different roles with different purposes or different kind of role descriptions, make sure that you're making relevant tweaks for each role, and then go ahead and apply. I know that some roles will require a cover letter as a recruiter, unless the role absolutely definitely requires a cover letter. I would say the focus needs to be on your CV for sure. So put your effort into that. Just make sure that everything that you're putting into your application or your CV lines up and is kind of presenting yourself in the best light. I'm sure that my colleagues will have extra comments.
Well, the cover letter one, because we've had someone come in and ask about cover letters. So, Harpreet, do you have any thoughts about cover letters? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so again, I think it varies, right? On that. So if your application requires one, then please do it when you are putting the application, because that's the requirement. But it, again, like I said previously, only add anything on your CV, or like if you feel like, I think cover letters are great when, say, you look at the transparent skills and it's not really sometimes obvious why you're applying for that particular role, and you're not able to show your interest, or maybe at your career, early part of your career. So it depends of what role you're applying for. Is it a new field you want to go into? Is there something you haven't found like a space in your CV to add, and you really want to kind of grasp that through? So I don't think it's a yes or no. For me, I do sometimes, like every cover letter comes, I will read it as well. So it's not like it's not noticed as well. So like I said, it all depends on the individual as well.
So we've had another good question come in, and Tom or Antonio, if you don't mind sort of covering this, but in terms of let's say that there's a similar CVs coming in for a role. So there's some roles in EY where we recruit for specific skills and qualifications, and some of the CVs or the skills may look quite serious. Someone has asked the question, how do I make myself stand out? How do I make my CV stand out? It's a tough question, but I just wonder, Tom, would you mind answering that initially?
I'll do my best for this, and I think it's just what I've been saying for a little while. I think it's numbers. Numbers. They paint the picture for me when I see a CV. I think it's a very initial thing. Like if I see a CV and there's numbers and figures and stats and percentages scattered throughout the job, or scattered throughout the duties and work experience, immediately I'm like, right, this is a person who's really thought about how they're presenting their work. It's the same if you're writing reports as well. You want to send numbers to, say if you're in audit or accounts or IT, you want your clients to see those figures and those numbers too. You can factor those into achievement. You can give us a sense of the scale that you work with too. that for me is one of the number one things that sets a CV apart, in my opinion, and from my experience of recruiting in finance, that is as well.
You love numbers, Tom.
I do.
Antonio, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's at that stage, if you have applied for a role and you've got the qualifications we're asking for, your CV is clear, and you're kind of in competition with other candidates who have very similar background, at that stage, the recruiter will be asking for more information. So we conduct, I mean, I'm sure it's the same, I know it's the same in most other companies. If you meet all those criteria, we'd be conducting screening calls, and again, that's just another platform for you to kind of add to that CV experience that you've got. I would, if you follow all the kind of a guidance that we give you, or any kind of other that you see online, and everything's kind of ticking the boxes, it's then comes into the process stage where we can really ask those questions and get into the nitty gritty, and then see if you're a good fit for the team. And that's kind of separate to your CV. If you've got everything on there that we need, that should be enough. You're not necessarily in competition with other candidates until you're in the process, and it's about fit then.
And I think, yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you can only write your CV to what you think is the best representation of yourself, and you've got no idea how other people are presenting their CVs. And to be honest with you, I've always said that you could send one CV to one hiring manager, and the same CV goes to their counterpart, and they may have two different opinions about the CV. Nowadays, I think a lot of companies have got training, they've got tools in place to make sure that CVs are obviously viewed as unbiased as possible. But yeah, there's only so much you can do to kind of like influence that. But there's some really good points there. And actually, Harpreet and Sam, within you, Sam, you work within audit. I'd be interested to hear if there's anything particular that makes a CV stand out in your particular space.
Yeah, so this advice is for all the auditors who are listening right now. Highlighting the industry and sectors you worked in is very important. So you can include that in the content of the CV or in your personal statement. Just make sure to highlight if you've worked under, for sector like banking, capital markets, or, mechanical. Just write them down. You don't have to write your client names down, but just the sector, industry, and highlight them. And another piece of advice is make sure to do your research, read through the job description, tweak your CV according to it, because every job role has different requirements. So kind of think about it and see if you have any transferable skills they can highlight on that will complement the job that you're applying to, or highlight any requirements that are required from you.
And Harpreet, do you have anything to add from consulting perspective? Is there anything that makes a consultant CV stand out?
I think rather than consultant, Sam's kind of mentioned like the key kind of stuff, which is like the sector base, your recent experience, or your technical skills, or if you've worked in consultancy, the consultancy skills as well. But just going back to the point of, I would look at, like, I think the question was like, I've written my CV in, that what else I would say is definitely something is your linked, if you are on LinkedIn profile, it matches your CV kind of thing as well, because that is viewed not just by the recruiters, that is going to be viewed by people might, just before the interview, they might have a look. So I think that my kind of big, rather just consulting, would be just make sure I know it's updated and it's fair, and it matches as well. So
That's a great shout. Yeah, as as a kind of ex-recruiter who works within a recruiting team, I think LinkedIn is such an important resource to have. More and more recruiters are using LinkedIn these days to search for you guys. And so having your LinkedIn up to date, having it matched up with your CV, you can even attach your CV on LinkedIn as well if you're actively looking for work, which I think is a great idea, if you're comfortable doing so anyway. But having your LinkedIn up to date and kind of as comprehensive as possible is a great way to have. And do you know what? You don't have to actively be looking for work to get offered the opportunity to secure a great role. I know a lot of candidates in EY EY, and I think the panelists would probably agree that we speak to are passively looking, and it's, you know, we see them on LinkedIn and we might reach out to them, or, you know, they might passively reach out. They join a webcast like this and they're like, oh, I'd love to work for EY. I'll just send a message over. I've seen already a few pop-ups come up. I've had some invitations on LinkedIn. Of course, everyone, you are welcome to connect with any of us on LinkedIn if you'd like to do so. But yeah, I think that's really important. And I'd like to touch on, if it's okay, to each of the panelists about let's talk about EY. We've talked we've given general advice about, you know, writing CVs, and each of you touched a bit on what we look for at EY. But are there any top tips for when applying for roles at EY? I'll come to you first, Sam. Have you got any top tips if anyone's going to be putting a CV together to apply for a role with us? Putting you on the spot, sorry.
No, it's all right. My advice is research. Do your research. Research on the job role, on the available opportunities that we have online, and yeah, get support on writing a CV. Google as to, you know, what a good CV is like. But honestly, it's just more, you know, just be clear and concise on your CV and highlight all the key skills you have. That's my piece of advice.
Great. Antonia, putting you on the spot now.
I think much the same. I would definitely recommend. We see a lot of applications that, you know, they attach to your candidate profile, and in your kind of bio on your profile, we can see that you've applied for potentially a few different type of jobs. And I would recommend, if you can, adjusting your application for each role if possible, but also being conscious of the roles that you're applying for. If I'm looking at, as a recruiter, if I'm looking at you and your CV is great, but I can see that you've applied to, you know, several roles, more than 15 roles of wildly different sectors, skill sets, etc., that's another question that kind of you would have to answer either in a screening or with your CV. And so kind of make sure that you're keeping it plain and simple, know what you're going for, know your goal and kind of what your aim is, and why you're wanting to join us. We want to know what you're looking for and why you want to join us.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. Harpreet?
So I would just a little bit disagree with Antje, because in tech, you won't, the skills are very transparent between tech consulting. So you could, and we see that internally. So we do see someone working in a particular sector and they could actually work in another team. So for me, I think in tech, we don't, because we appreciate the fact that unless you've worked in a very similar role, you would know exactly what you're applying for. So for
Okay.
me is we would have that conversation ourselves to kind of differ, you know, this particular team, because it's not just the technical, it's the team, it's the project.
Yeah.
We would, you know, really have that conversation at pre-reg that this is the particular project you work on, or this is that particular team. Because so for me, I don't think that would really matter as much in tech. Like I said, even internally, we see a lot of moves ourselves. So
Okay.
yeah, that the other tip would be is don't apply when you really put yourself, when you're doing the application, to be in that time frame. I know it's really difficult when you're applying for jobs and you're doing a day job and your other stuff, but really be in that mindset of applying, because you know you are going to take that extra time to fill those you know, whether it's your CV, whether it's the application or the other questions. So really that, and definitely research. There's so much out there at the moment as well of,
Great.
and don't just apply for the technical skill of that role. It's really for the culture as well of that particular company as well. Research that.
Great advice. And Tom?
Fairly quick one, because I recruit at director level and the partner non-equity. In addition, just to all the details and the work experience and sector experience and everything that comes with it, just take some time to highlight leadership and times where you've led teams, times you've maybe, you know, really stepped up. That's the only thing I can think to add.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you. I did want to add that we've had some questions come in about student roles, and Sam had touched on that. Our application process is slightly different for students, but of course there are tips and hints available for students if you're applying outside of EY. As I said at the start of the session, this session is designed to give a wide audience wide advice about putting a CV together, not just specifically for EY, but in Sam, I'm just going to come to you for, I think this is probably going to be our last question, but for students, any top tips when they're putting a CV together?
Well, like I mentioned before, make sure to start with strong objective and then highlight your aspirations. And remember, your to also include in your previous experience as well, like if you have done your internship or part-time jobs, include that in. And of course your degree, you highlight your education is your biggest asset as a fresh as a fresh grad, so put that on as well. And in terms of filling on application form on the student recruitment website, make sure to fill in as many details as you can, as honest as you can as well, because it will then help you to move forward to the next stage.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you. I think we're nearly pretty much at time. So I just wanted to, so thank you so much to the panelists for your input. Thank you for all your questions.